My controversial take is that big decisions are better made fast than slow.
I love it.
There is a massive tendency that we all have to say, okay, big decision. I'm going to make a piece of paper, split it into two. There's going to be pros and cons. We're going to write it all out and do this really analytical process around it. What happens when you do that is you just paralyze yourself, usually. Yeah. Big decisions are really hard. They're complex, but usually your gut is right. And if you trust it, you learn to trust your intuition around it, you make the right decision. And you knew that going in.
Yeah.
And so I've always found that a big decision like that, sometimes you just need to like jump out of the plane and hope the parachute is packed tight.
Man, it is great to be with you in New York City.
I'm excited to get to do this in person. I feel like when we first connected, I think Nick Huber connected us, our mutual friend, the very controversial Mr. Huber.
The goat.
He connected us, and I remember we talked about doing a podcast, and it was like February or something like that. Yeah. And I was like, hey, we should do it in person. You were like, well, I'm coming to New York in the summer. That feels so far off at the time. So it's nice that it's finally here.
Dude, I love it up here. This place gives me a ton of energy. Been here for 2 days, and I've just been really looking forward to it.
You're going to be gassed and ready to go home by the end,
dude,
though.
These people are nuts.
Yeah, it's
Dinners
a different
are
level.
like 8 or 9 o'clock here.
Yeah, we're doing 6. You can have a second dinner after that. That's great. I was joking the other day with a friend that I only do dinners now at like 6 p.m. so that I can still get home, with my 1-year-old, put him to bed, and then get to bed at my early hours so that I can wake up early. So it's funny. It's like I have actually gone out to dinner with a few people, and they've had their second dinner after like the normal New York 8:39 dinner.
I love it, dude. I've been going to bed at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Maybe I will do a second dinner. How far is it back to Westchester?
Like 35 minutes, no traffic. So it's not bad at all, actually.
So I actually really admire you for moving back to Westchester, because you came from a place where what you're doing now, it probably made more sense to stay in the scene.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of jumping here, but let's talk about just like life here and why it probably benefits you more.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest reason for the move to New York was family reasons. So, the story is we were living in California. I had gone to California for college. So both my wife and I grew up in the Boston area.
Okay.
We're high school sweethearts. We met. She was 14 years old. I was 15. Dated all the way through high school, all the way through college. She moved out when we got engaged to California. I had gone to Stanford, played baseball, and then I took a job there.
Yeah.
My mom was pissed when I took the job there because like Indian mother, being close to family is like really important culturally. And I took a job 3,000 miles away, and she saw the writing on the wall that like, oh, you're just going to live in California the rest of your life. You're going to build your life there. And then COVID hit. And for me, like a lot of people, that was like the pause point of the, holy shit, is this what my life is going to be like for the rest of it? Or are we going to make a change? And I had a single conversation with a friend that completely changed my entire life. And he asked me how old my parents were and how many times I saw them per year. And I said, well, my dad's 65 years old and I see him about once a year. And he said, okay, so you're going to see him 15 more times before he dies. And I remember it being like this punch in the gut feeling, but also a call to action of, okay, then you got to make a change if you want to change the math that you just heard. And so we, within 45 days, sold this new house that we had just built in California, literally like had moved into it, taken a year to build. We moved into it 18 months before we sold it, and bought a new house in New York and moved across the country. And I quit my job all in the span of 45 days, did all of that. And the biggest driver of Westchester was like, neither one of us were big city people. Yeah. I love my peace and quiet. I like doing all my stupid shit with the cold plunge and sauna. It's hard to have that in the city.
Yeah.
And then the distance from there to Boston, just driving wise, like it's only 20 miles shorter if you avoid the city, but it's like an hour of time shorter because you don't have to deal with city traffic. And so it's like a 2 hour and 45 minute drive, very easy to see family. And with the little one, makes a huge difference.
I love it. All right. So I've spent a lot of time kind of watching some of your other stuff and obviously been getting to know you and following you, but there isn't a lot on your growing up, like when you were a kid. And you've already said it once, you said my Indian mother. Mm-hmm. So I kind of wanted to start out with like, how did you grow up? What influence did your parents have on you? Like, what are the core things that came from early on that kind of made you who you are today?
Yeah. I haven't talked about it a lot. I'm really like a collision of two very weird worlds. Yeah. My mother is Indian, grew up in Bangalore, India. My father is white Jewish from the Bronx in New York. And my mom came over for college when she was 18, hadn't told her parents she was applying, kind of was like the mischievous youngest child, applied to school in the US, came over. And my dad was like following this very nerdy academic track. Like he was going to go become a professor. And so he was like marching on his path. She was marching on hers. Both of them were basically supposed to marry. My dad was supposed to marry a nice white Jewish girl. My mom was supposed to marry a nice Indian boy. And like that was supposed to be their life.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, they crossed over by 2 weeks when my dad was finishing his PhD at Princeton. My mom was just starting a master's there. And my mom was working in the library. My dad was like studying for his dissertation defense or whatever it was. And my mom asked him for ice cream and they ended up going out on a date. And during those 2 weeks, they connected and, the rest was sort of history in terms of their relationship. The very unfortunate thing, which I haven't really talked about publicly, is my dad's family didn't accept it. And it was 1982, 1980 when they first met, I guess. So times were slightly different.
Yeah.
An interracial relationship, maybe it's still crazy to me, but maybe slightly more controversial at the time. And, neither family was super excited about the idea of them not following the path, but his family, his dad really didn't accept it. And basically told him he had to choose between my mom or his family.
Wow.
And he walked out the door. And to this day, I've never met my dad's father, who passed away many years ago. I've never met his mother. He has siblings I've never met. I have first cousins I've never met.
Really?
Like a full separation from the family over this. And, look, there's a water under the bridge effect after a number of years that it's very hard to remedy or change. I often think about whether we should go and visit his mother. She's quite old now. Now life is a lot different.
Yeah.
The influence of his father isn't around anymore necessarily. But a really sad thing that I think caused my mom a lot of grief as well, of just feeling like she was the reason that my dad had this breakup with his family. But what it meant for my own upbringing was that I just felt like my dad was the most unbelievably supportive father I could imagine. And we weren't rich. Like my dad was a professor, he's an academic. So it's not like he was a businessman making tons of money or a hedge fund guy. We were middle class. But my dad worked really hard and also found a way to support me in everything I was doing, both with his own physical time being there and also just with his energy. And to this day, I think back on that and I think about it a lot in the context of the type of father I want to be. I just always knew that my dad believed in me and that he had my back.
Yep.
And that is just such a powerful thing as a kid, feeling like your parents have your back and that they believe in you. And when they pushed me, which they did, because both of them had really high standards for what they thought my sister and I should achieve, older sister, I always knew it came from a place of belief rather than something that they wanted. Like it wasn't about, hey, go get this accolade because we want to sound impressive to our friends and go brag about our kids, which I think a lot of parents do these days. It was always about like, we believe in you and we believe you are capable of this thing and we're supporting you in this thing because we know what you're capable of and we want you to go and push yourself. And that's just such a powerful thing in hindsight.
It's huge. I mean, I just got done reading a book by John Eldridge. And he just says all little boys, all they really want in life is to know that they have what it takes. And that continues on into manhood. He talks about women. They want to know that they're beautiful and that they're seen. But for men, we want to know that we have what it takes. And it starts as being a father. Like you get a lot of that strength from your father.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, there's just so many powerful lessons in that honestly, I don't feel like we ever vocalize to our fathers. The things that we feel like we appreciate in hindsight or learned or, that we saw them embody. I mean, my dad worked about as hard in like the lowest leverage career path you could possibly choose. I mean, we're going to talk, I'm sure, a lot about business, about leverage, about all the things that we're doing to try to create leverage in our lives. The academic track is one of the lowest time leverage things you can possibly do because it's all about research output. And research output, there was no AI. Like research output was grinding into the ground to put out papers. And my dad has grinded into the ground more like substantive papers than almost anyone else within his field. I mean, he's truly a leader within his field. And it's incredible to see the people that he's, connected and impacted as a result. But that meant hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of hardworking hours to go into it, with not a massive financial reward on the back end of it, right? Like you're not even the Nobel Prize winners, like you're not making $100 million for winning the Nobel Prize. There's, it's an accolade and it, puts you in a place of esteem, but you're not getting some huge reward. So I saw him work extremely, extremely hard on something, but then always find the time to be there for my sister and I and for my mom. And that meant like he would get home from work. He would always be home for dinner, to have dinner with the family. We'd always sit down together. And if I asked him to go outside and play catch, he would go outside and play catch with me. And when I was a kid, I didn't appreciate that. I was just like, oh yeah, my dad plays catch with me. Now I look back and I say, damn, like he must have been so tired at the end of a long day, having to think about complex problems all day and deal with tons of people. And he always had the energy to step up and go outside and play with me. Because I think about it in my own life now, like I'm tired at the end of the day. And when my son, he's 1 now, he's kind of crazy, he's going around doing things, it tires me out.
Yeah.
And so the ability to like flip that switch and have energy and do those things when your kids want you to, I just admire it so much in hindsight. And it really cemented an incredible relationship that I feel like carries through to this day that I have with my dad.
I love it. We have that in common. My dad was a lawyer till he was 37, came home and he was a partner at a law firm, came home and said, I want to become a doctor.
Oh, wow.
Went back to undergrad at 38 to get prerequisites, and we started medical school. I was 7 and he was 39.
Wow.
When he went back to medical school. So basically, like my early years from 8 to 15 was a father similar to yours, about as even lower leverage of time, $0 for medical school for 4 years. He was always on call. You could tell he was tired, but he always had a window for me when I needed it. And at the time, like you said, probably just one thing much of is like, that's what dads do when their kids ask them. I'm just curious, what does your dad teach? What
economics was his main field of study. So like economics and demography.
Okay.
So a lot of work around like population growth and health and aging in the developing world.
Okay.
So a lot of his work was like around Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. Fortunately, I got to travel with him on a lot of that work. So I got to see a lot of the world in those early years. That was incredible and substantive in terms of my own life.
Okay, and then what are the core tenets of a Indian mother? Like what?
I joke about this all the time on Twitter that like my Indian mother is still disappointed in me that I didn't win like a Rhodes Scholarship.
But you hear it often, like an Indian mother brings with them some like core things.
Yeah, there's a level of like playful harassment that comes with having an Indian mother of like, wanting you to do more and do things. And, the culture, Indian culture is very social and family oriented. I think about this all the time as an amazing feature of Indian culture. My grandmother, on my mom's side, my grandfather, her husband, passed away in 2007.
Okay.
For 13 years following that, my grandmother did not go a single day without having someone come and call on her, check on her, spend time with her, be around her, ask her how she was doing. Until COVID hit, when she wasn't able to because of lockdowns and no one was able to come see her.
Oh, wow.
My grandmother aged more over the 2 years of COVID than she had over the 13 years leading up to that. Because the social connection is so important to your overall health, how your mind continues to function. But the culture is one that is so powerful around that social connection where like in America, if someone passes away, maybe for a month that happens. People go and show up and they're there and they're cooking food for the person. They're there and supporting them. And that's great. But for 13 years, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's just hardwired, ingrained into the society. And it's such a great feature. It's also something that leads to a lot of like overbearing parents, I think. And I actually don't consider my mom to be particularly overbearing. But what she does have is very high standards and she holds my sister and I in very high regard of what she thinks we're capable of. And so that always came across to me growing up as like, oh, if I don't do this, my mom is not going to be impressed or disappointed, or happy with me and whatever it was. My sister was also like the golden child. She was my older sister. She was 3.5 years older than me. And she was always the one that was like getting the best grades in school. And so I would inevitably, and maybe other people can relate to this, I would get to whatever grade I was starting. First day of school, I'd go into the class. They'd be reading off like the attendee list. They'd mispronounce my name, but they would see like, they'd say Sahil Bloom. And they'd say, and I'd raise my hand and they were like, oh, are you Sonali's brother? And they would have this look of hope of like, oh, this is going to be our star student. And inevitably within 2 weeks, I would disappoint them, whatever it was. Because I was a shithead. I was like, I was a little boy. I was like running around playing sports with my friends and, doing whatever bad stuff I wasn't supposed to do in class.
Yeah.
And so that was actually quite tough for me during my childhood years because I always felt like I was disappointing someone. And it led to me feeling like I really needed to carve my own path. And my mom didn't understand baseball or that sports were a path that you could like get into college and that there was these opportunities around. And so it was very weird for her. Like she saw me getting B's and B pluses in high school and thought that I was going to be like a failure living on the streets. Like I was going to be under a bridge somewhere or something like that. Like I really think in her mind, that was what it was. Like her hopes of having a Rhodes Scholar son were gone. As it turned out, I was actually quite good at baseball, and all the energy I applied to that led to something really great. But it's been this ongoing joke in our family that like, oh, I didn't get a Rhodes Scholarship, and then, I didn't end up taking a job at McKinsey, and then I didn't become a doctor or a lawyer, and now you're like writing for, what are all these things? And honestly, there are certain ways in which it has impacted decisions that I've made. Like, when I went to raise my venture fund, I did a traditional fund rather than a rolling fund because part of it was like, I want something real and substantive that I can like show my mom. When I was doing my book deal, I like signed a book deal with Penguin Random House, and that felt very official. Like, oh, I'm not just a Twitter writer, mom. Like I have a book deal from Penguin Random House. Like my grandmother knows what that is in India. So, it's something that I joke about, but there are definitely real ways that, that my Indian mother has impacted the way that I've thought about pursuing things and
I love it.
The officialness of it.
Is it fair to say that she's proud of you now? Or are there
so.
Still levels to this stuff?
I think she's most proud of the type of father and husband that I am more than anything else today. She knows that I am deeply, deeply protective of my wife and son. And, in a lot of ways, I think that being the protector and feeling like I'm able to kind of step up for the people that I care about is the most important thing in my world. Yeah. And I think of, any financial success and business success as all part of that too, of like, you're doing the things you need to do to take care of your family. If I were to get hit by a bus, I want to make sure that my family is taken care of and that things are okay for them. And I think my mom has kind of gotten to see me embrace these different changes in my world and how I'm running at different things that I'm excited about. I think she gets really excited about that.
I love it. All right, we'll kind of skip a little bit. So you go and you played baseball, then you got into PE. I kind of want to start, maybe I guess when COVID started was kind of when your world kind of changed.
Yeah.
Like walk me through the day that you were like, I'm going to start writing on Twitter, or like literally the moment that maybe you didn't think anything of it. You're like, it's going to be a hobby for a couple weeks, blow some time. Or was it like a conscious decision? I'm going to go build something.
No, it was not a conscious decision. I mean, I had a great thing going, to be totally honest. Like I really, and to this day, like I loved the firm I was at. The people were awesome. It just wasn't for me. Yeah. And I didn't know how to describe that because everything that I had viewed as success was about money. My entire life up to that point was like, oh, I need to make this much money and that's going to make me successful. Yeah. And I was doing that. And so my mind, like I couldn't rationalize the feeling of, what, like, is this it? I couldn't rationalize that feeling of there has to be something more because it seemed like I was accomplishing all the things I was supposed to accomplish. COVID hit, and that was the first time that I'd actually had time to think about these things. Like for a lot of people, I just wasn't working the 80 to 100-hour weeks that I was before because there was no commuting, there was no 3 days of travel a week. All of those things had been taken away. And so I had a lot of time to like walk and, be stuck at home, and I didn't have a social life, and you're like in your own head for the first time in a really long time. And what I noticed and what I was observing about the world at that point, that's like a common thread for me, by the way, is like, I try to just be as observant as possible about the things that are happening. You see, I like carry around a notebook with me. I write things down. And what I noticed was that there were a lot of people that were confused about what was happening in the world, particularly in the world of markets and finance. It was a time, if you remember, that like markets were just starting to rip up, but everyone was still unemployed and at home, and unemployment was through the roof. And so I had all of these friends from my baseball days that were constantly texting me like, dude, what the hell is going on? I don't understand. Because I was their finance friend. And it didn't matter that they didn't understand that I didn't work in markets. I had no connection to public markets, no idea what was going on. But that I was their finance friend. So they were asking me. And what I realized was there was just a gap in the market, if you will, for sort of like layman's terms explanations that were digestible, accessible, etc., around things that were happening in the world of finance. There was plenty of like talking head pundits that you could go listen to on Bloomberg or, CNBC that would like give you the big jargony words to make you feel smart that actually make you feel dumb. There was plenty of that, but there wasn't a whole, and then there was plenty of like TikTokers telling you to YOLO into GameStop call options on the lower end.
My God.
But there was no one in the middle that was just like, here's what's, just give you the simple way of doing it. And so that was what I started doing. The first thing I wrote was basically an explanation of the Fed put, like the idea that the Fed had come in and said they were a buyer at any price and why that was making the market rip upwards. And I wanted to explain that using storytelling. And so I did that. And I basically wrote it on a walk. I like sat down on the floor of my garage when I got home, like wrote out this, thing that I was going to post on Twitter. I had 500 followers at the time. And I came inside and I was like, I said to my wife, I was like, this is a banger. Like this is going viral for sure when I post this tomorrow morning. And she kind of like rolled her eyes at me. She was like, that's ridiculous, whatever. And so I'm in bed the next morning. And at the time, Twitter didn't have thread functionality. So you actually had to like comment under each one. So I like posted the first thing, then I copied and pasted in for my note. And the second one.
To get
yeah, exactly. And so I like posted whatever it was, 5 tweets, 6 tweets. And an hour goes by and it has like 3 or 4 likes, right? Like, and she like came over and she's like, so you going viral yet? King viral over here. And, like giving me shit. And, nothing had happened. And so then I was like, I wonder if there's a way to sort of hustle this thing. And I saw that Chamath had posted something sort of tangentially related to what I'd been talking about. And I basically just commented under it, linking to my thread and saying like, oh yeah, like completely agree. Like just wrote this thing explaining it in simple terms. He retweeted it and said like, this is good. And at the time, he wasn't as big of a deal as he is today, but he was already, at a few 100,000 followers. And all of a sudden the thing went bananas. And like, now maybe I wouldn't consider it bananas, like, but it got a few thousand likes for the first thing that I put out. And it jumped me from 500 followers to 2,000. And in that moment, I was like, maybe there's something to this, not as a business, but as a concept of explaining these things in simple terms. Maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
And that was really the start of what has been, this crazy journey that's taken me on all these paths and winding roads.
Okay, so you get to 2,000 followers, and then you're probably like, all right, I should do this again. I'm gonna post something else. How do you continue to get inspiration for like what you're going to talk about next? Like, I kind of want to stay on this journey of what happened next.
Yeah.
Because I think building the story, because then we're going to spend the good chunk of like how this has turned into a business. I think the number one comment people left on Twitter is like, what does he do?
Yeah.
And my question to you is going to be like, if I have to go home and tell my 6-year-old, hey, I interviewed a friend of mine.
Yeah.
This is what he does.
Yeah.
What am I going to be able to tell him?
Yeah. Let's get
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, my inspiration in the first 3 months was things that my former baseball friends were asking me questions about.
Okay.
And, so it went from like, how do I do these call option things? And me trying to be like, dude, don't do these call option things. Just buy an index fund. But then them being like, no, I want to do this. So I wrote an explainer trying to explain in simple terms what a call option was.
Yeah.
And I kind of just pursued that. I was like, well, I'm in finance, so I sort of have credibility around this. Like, at least externally, people will think I have credibility around this.
Yep.
And I know that I'm willing to do a bunch of research to make sure that this stuff is right. And then I have a way with words that I can kind of craft it into like a story that feels simple and neat and interesting. And so I basically just said, I'm going to do this like once or twice a week. And I was still working my full-time job. So that was really like Saturday or Sunday. I was sitting down for a few hours and writing these things. At the time, it was actually pretty research intensive because I was needing to learn about these different concepts for myself. And so I was learning a lot, which was fun. And I was spending a lot of time on it, and it was getting traction. There were a lot of people that were sharing the different things I was putting out. I was starting to build a reputation as someone that was creating around this stuff. And I was early to a market in the sense that like Twitter threads weren't a thing yet. Yep. There weren't very many people that were doing that. So I was sort of an early adopter of a new format. Twitter, I think, was prioritizing the content at the time because it was keeping people on the platform and it was good for business. And it started to really accelerate. So by the end of 2020, I was probably around 75 or so thousand followers on the platform. And that was it. It was just Twitter. I didn't have any other platforms. I didn't have a newsletter. I didn't have anything else. And there was still no thought of this being a business. There wasn't like, any idea that there was a business to be made there. What there was clear proof of concept that I had, a platform. And like, that was a lot of people to me at the time. I really thought I was famous. I was like, man, I've made it. I mean, when I hit 4,000 followers, I called my dad and I was like, Dad, I made it. I'm famous. This is a real thing. But at 75, I was like, oh, there's really something to this. And I started just thinking like, okay, I can't just write about personal finance concepts all the time.
Yep.
I didn't find it particularly interesting. I didn't care about it. So I started testing the boundaries of how I could kind of expand my like sphere of credibility, if you will.
Yep.
So I started writing a little about mental models and started writing about a little more life stuff, like things that I was just interested in, that I was thinking about on a daily basis. I started sharing about. And that was when things kind of hit a tipping point for me, going into early 2021.
When you started, you said you got to the end of the year, 2020 with 75,000 followers. At that point, had you also built a network of other people on Twitter that you might start learning from? Or because there's things that I've learned, even, I'm not near the following you have. I have 80 something thousand, but you realize really quickly that there's like groups of people that help each other, help push each other, help learn ways to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. About, I'm trying to think when it was. It was probably like September of 2020. I had started, like, once I had more of a platform, it's much easier to reach people. And so there was like people that I just kind of admired that were out there, creating content that I'd started to get to know a little bit. And it was like, people you all know today of like Sean Puri and Nick and Austin Reef and like a handful of these people that were all sort of building burgeoning platforms at the time, Sam Parr. And basically I got invited and coordinated into this text thread, of a group of people that at the time we called it 100K Club, because it was all people that were trying to get to 100,000 on Twitter. So it was like Julian Shapiro, Greg Eisenberg, Sean, Sam, Austin Reef, Nikita, Nick, like this group of people. And it was fun. It was like, people became your friends because you were stuck at home. We were just like bullshitting on, stuff that was happening on Twitter, and we would engage with each other's content in order to support each other. We weren't like retweeting each other's stuff because all of us wanted to like maintain sort of the credibility of our feeds. But we were engaging with each other's content, and everyone was putting out interesting content. So it was cool and sort of in our own domains. That definitely helped, and sort of kind of boosted people in different directions, just supporting each other in those days. But again, like, there really wasn't a business around any of this. Those guys were all running businesses. So it was actually part of how they were making money. For me, I was making money as a VP at this private equity fund. I was like, part of the GP. I was doing well, like making money. And this was like this weird thing I was doing on the weekends that the partners were probably starting to look at, like, why is this guy tweeting and doing this stuff?
One thing about, I've followed you since the beginning. I remember Nick was like, you got to follow him. And so it's been 4 or 5 years now, or maybe 3 or 4 years. But it seems to me like you made a conscious decision really early. Like, I'm not engaging in any bullshit on Twitter. Like, I've actually never seen you even once. And now maybe I don't see everything you tweet, but I've never seen you break the law. You have stayed true. Was that something? And I 2 years ago broke the law for about 3 months. I totally just got on there and got sucked into the vortex and was firing at it. I literally wrote an apology tweet to all my followers and said, I'm done. I'm not getting into politics. My apologies. But can you just tell me, like, was it a conscious decision you made that, like, this account is for one purpose only, and I'm not going to get into the madness? Because you have stuck true to it more than anybody I know.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to it. One side is I don't like negativity. And I don't like inviting negativity into my life if I don't need it there. If someone comes to my doorstep and there's an issue, I'm happy to have an issue, but I don't want to go invite a bunch of people to my doorstep that have an issue is kind of a way of thinking about it. And so you attract what you put out. And so if I put out things that I think are controversial or, likely to draw the ire of the masses, that's what you get back. And I've just never really wanted to do that. So constantly, I mean, people try to attack me on Twitter now just because you have scale. And I think my content is like super flowery to a fault, but people decide they want to attack you for whatever reason. And I don't like fire back at people. And I could, right? Like, I spent years in a locker room. I'm like built for this, man. I'm built to go just destroy people. And I'll like send to friends, like, here's what I would say, but I'm not going to say it, just to like make sure they know I still got it. But I just leave all that stuff out. The other piece to it is my general opinion is if you have a goal in mind for what you're doing, you can't have multiple goals of it. And so what I mean by that is, like, if my goal is to impact people positively with, content related to improving their life, their health and wealth, and, how they live their life, me going on the platform and talking about my views on politics, my views on social issues, my views on anything is actually not driving forward that goal. It's maybe beneficial in, the ecosystem of me wanting to promote my views if I think those are important to the world, but it's not beneficial to what my main goal is, which is to positively impact lives. And so I don't understand why I would do that then. And there are constantly people that are like, hey, you should weigh in on whatever X thing is that is the current thing that people, are weighing in on. And my response is always that it's not what this account is for. It's not what my platform is for. My platform is for trying to help people live healthier, wealthier lives. If it's not that, I'm not talking about it public. I talk about it in private with you all night. After dinner, when we go out, we can talk about it all we want with my friends, whoever. And I'm not afraid to share my views. It's just it's not conducive to what my end goal is. And if it's going to take 50% of the people that are in my audience and make them feel like I'm not connected with them, then what was the point?
Well, you're an outlier because a lot of accounts, once they get big enough, they become experts on the current thing and everything they're doing. And you also said something is basically, in one way, you probably look at your account as like, this is me. But in another way, you're able to detach yourself from the account.
It's I think there's a lot of people.
Correct. There's a lot. And we're gonna get that's the next. But there's a lot of people, I think, that don't really know what their account's for. I've probably been one of those people that dip in and out of it.
It's also a humility. I mean, you said it. There's a humility here of, I don't know anything about the world. And having humility around that. Have you heard the story of the blind men and the elephant?
No.
So it's this story. 6 blind men are brought to examine this elephant that comes into town. The first one touches the ear and says, oh, the elephant is like a fan. The second one touches the trunk and says, oh, the elephant is like a snake. The third one touches the tail and says the elephant's like a rope, and so on. They each touch a part of the elephant and then determine what the elephant is like on the basis of that. And they're all partially right, but also entirely wrong because their own perspective is just this narrow viewpoint, the narrow lens that they've looked at it through. And so having humility around the fact that we know so little around the world and that the truth that we think is the absolute truth is this tiny sliver that we've perceived the world through. That humility is really, really important. So for me to come and tell other people that their perspective is wrong, when it might just be governed by the fact that they have a totally different set of information in their world, I just think is an arrogance that I don't want to have in my life. I want to be open to changing my mind on anything at any point in time. And I think we should all support that in each other much more. Rather than calling people flip-floppers who change their mind, it should actually be something that we want to actively promote in the people that are leading society.
Oh, man. All right. So we end 2020, you got 75,000, but you said, I still haven't thought of it as a business. The next question is, when did you finally wake up one day, or was it a series of conversations, or maybe you met with somebody? When did you wake up and the light bulb went off? Holy shit, I have something here.
So right at the end of 2020, I had invested in a bunch of startups on the side, just personal, I had made money from my PE days, and I really liked startups. I thought it was interesting. My networks had started to connect there from Stanford and then from the Twitter stuff. And so I'd invested in a bunch of startups. A bunch of the startup founders started coming to me saying, how can I grow on these platforms? Because they saw the value in it. It was like the early days of like the whole personal brand, building that, and the value that founders were finding in it. I started basically consulting for a few of those startup founders saying like, hey, I can help you because I have the playbooks. I know how to make this work. I can do that. And what ended up forming as a result of that was like, I didn't know it at the time. I just thought of it as like, advisory work. But it was actually like an agency, sort of like a personal brand agency that started to be built. That business, which was basically, $5K a month retainers, grew to being a $50K a month thing that was pure profit because it was just me. And it was basically like a little bit of strategy work helping them. And a tiny bit of like editing and sort of, ghostwriting on the margin. Not really ghostwriting because they were all writing the stuff. But all of a sudden that opened my eyes to, in early 2021, there's actually like an engine that is generating a bunch of cash that this is like on the weekend right now I'm doing this. I haven't really spent any time on it. And that was the first time I started to think about, okay, there's businesses, then there's the content thing. And what does this whole ecosystem actually start to look like then?
And were those people saying, hey, will you help me promote my brand as a founder, or will you write content to help our company grow, or both?
No, it was like, hey, I'm building this business. I want to grow my personal brand because I see the value in driving down customer acquisition cost, and customer being investors, being employees, being actual customers, whatever it was. People started seeing the value in that. And we were sort of in these early days where there was like clear arbitrage of Twitter threads. It was before LinkedIn, anyone had really taken notice of it. So it was really Twitter. But it was felt like a black box to everyone of like, how do you actually do this on Twitter? No one really understood. And there were actually, at the time at least, just like very clear formulas for how to make it work, the things you should be writing about, how regularly, how to make it pop in the algorithm, all of those things. And I could help people with that. I had, developed a marketable skill, as it were. And so while I had my, full-time job on the weekends, I was like doing this thing that had then grown to the point where like it was making me as much cash comp as I was at my day job in a tiny fraction of the hours. And that was what unlocked my eyes to this whole thing. And also started making me think the traditional way that creators make money is a little bit flawed, or at least a little bit too narrow for how I would think about it as I went forward.
Okay, so you came home and you said, honey, I think I'm going to leave PE. I've played baseball. I've gone to Stanford. I've joined PE, and I'm leaving, and I'm getting into content.
So not quite. What ended up actually happening was the conversation happened that I mentioned at the very outset of, realizing that my parents weren't going to be around forever.
Okay.
We were going to move back to the East Coast. When that happened, I told my firm that I was planning to leave because we were going to move to the East Coast. They, were interested in potentially me working remotely. I'm not a big believer in the ability to work remotely in a job like that. I saw so much importance of just being in the trenches with people on a daily basis, the value that had early in my career. And I didn't want to be that absent, manager that would like fly in once every other week and think that I had a relationship with people. It just didn't make sense to me. And so what my plan was that I was going to go join another investment firm in New York. And so I started going and interviewing for these things and really ran into like a buzzsaw of interview processes where most of the senior people at those firms just could not wrap their head around me continuing to have this public presence while working there. And I still to this day think it was very narrow-minded because I think there'd be immense value if you just opened your eyes to it a bit. But that was their perspective. And I think a lot of it is ego, right? Like, the founder of some firm doesn't want some junior person to have a bigger presence than them or a bigger name or like be the alpha in the room. These like in finance, it's like very alpha male, it's like guerrilla culture, right? It's like who's the alpha male and you got to know there's one alpha male in the room. And so I had a lot of trouble when I was going and doing that. That was like around April, May of 2021. And I basically hit a low point where I had already told my firm I was leaving. So I was sort of like lame duck. And I didn't have a new thing. All of them had kind of run to ground and been dry. And I woke up one morning and I was like having a panic attack on like I screwed over this thing that was really good that I had going for me in California. I don't have a new thing. And I was talking to my wife and she said, well, like you're making all this money on this other thing that you're doing and you're only doing that on the weekend. Like, what if you just did that? Like, what does that look like if you just did that? Wouldn't that be great? And you could work for yourself. And honestly, I just never thought about it until she said it. Because I don't come from an entrepreneurial background. Like my dad, as I said, is like an academic track. Everything's about safe. He's a tenured professor. That's like the safest track you can possibly have in life. And so my whole thing was always like W-2 income, safe employment, the track, partner track, whatever.
Make mom happy.
Yeah, and exactly. And I'd never thought about it. And so she said it, and I kind of thought like, oh, wow. I didn't go to business school. And so my mind was like, we've saved up money. We have a good base. Maybe I can just have this be like, if it works out, amazing. That's my upside case. If it doesn't, it's like a 2-year MBA. I went and gave something a shot and tried to build some businesses and saw what happened. But that was really the tipping point, was actually her saying, maybe you should go give this thing a shot that you're doing on the side.
I don't think it should be overlooked. Before we carry on that, and you already described it, but was there anything else that went in the decision of we are going to uproot our life? We just built a house. Usually for like 99% of Americans, you build the house, that is like it.
Yeah.
There's nothing. Was there anything else that went through your mind that was like, we're going to make a big decision here? I mean, When I think about my dad going to medical school, that wasn't like the popular thing to do. When I think about this decision you make, and when I wrote that tweet on Twitter about my dad, I got done with breakfast and I wrote a tweet, and it was basically like, now that I'm almost 37 years old, I realize how crazy it is. And my dad went from being a lawyer to a doctor, something of that degree. Got 240,000 likes.
Whoa.
It was the only tweet that I ever did that went viral. But what I learned in the comments is like almost everybody is like wants to do this thing and they can't do it. So was there anything else in that decision to move home besides we just want to be by our parents that gave you the courage? And maybe that was the reason, but having the courage to actually pull it off is a big deal.
My controversial take is that big decisions are better made fast than slow.
I love it.
There is a massive tendency that we all have to say, okay, big decision. I'm going to make a piece of paper, split it into two. There's going to be pros and cons. We're going to write it all out and do this really analytical process around it. What happens when you do that is you just paralyze yourself, usually. Yeah. Big decisions are really hard. They're complex, but usually your gut is right. And if you trust it, you learn to trust your intuition around it, you make the right decision. And you knew that going in.
Yeah.
And so I've always found that a big decision like that, sometimes you just need to like jump out of the plane and hope the parachute is packed tight. And that's what we did. I mean, we really just jumped out and like pulled the parachute cord and hope that we land safely. And I'm so glad that we did.
Oh, I mean, can tell.
Part of it is just like you need a change of scenery every now and then.
Yeah.
Like if you don't like where you're at in life, the first thing to do is just change your environment.
Yep.
One way or another, if you don't like where you are. And if it's like people, you need to get around different people, just do it. Change the people that you're around on a daily basis. If it's the space physically, change it. I didn't love where we were in life and what we were doing and what the path looked like. I didn't like the mountain I was climbing and I didn't like what the prize looked like at the top. And so I needed to change it.
Do you think you were, not that COVID was a gift from the standpoint of what had happened to America, but do you think the gift of COVID from the standpoint of it gave you time, what you said, for the first time to think?
Yeah,
like,
massively. I mean, it was
if COVID hadn't happened, we might not be sitting here right now.
We would not be sitting here right now. Definitively full stop. I would still be working in my career. I would be, a principal at a private equity fund. And, I would be making a bunch of money and that would be my life. Yeah. And, maybe I'd have moments of happiness, but I know I wouldn't be as happy as I am today.
Yeah. You wouldn't see your son as much.
No, I certainly wouldn't see my son as much. And my life would be very, very different. I mean, COVID was a terrible thing for a lot of people. It was an amazing thing for my wife and I and for our family.
So I think the lesson there is I'm actually doing this in a couple months. I've never done it. I'm renting an Airbnb, going for like 2 or 3 days by myself.
Yeah.
It's creating an experience week.
Yeah. Bill Gates had this thing called the Think Week that he started doing, I think in the 1980s at Microsoft, where for a week he would go and have everything shut off, no meetings. He would just bring a bunch of reading, journal, and just think for a week on the biggest picture things in his life. I do it once a month, but I do it for a day.
Okay.
I block out a day once a month where I can just spend time thinking and completely get away from any like email, meetings, nothing, no writing, whatever, just journal, read things that I've been wanting to read. And I think it's a really, really good practice because ideating and thinking is the one thing that you never make time in your calendar for. Yep. We all have like scheduled meetings. We have scheduled time when we email. We have, scheduled time when we write, all the like things, deep focus work, whatever. You never have a block of time on your calendar where you just say like, think. And if you go through life without thinking, you end up going into a whole bunch of default stuff that you otherwise could have figured out a better way to design.
Do you often come out of Think Day with unexpected things, or is it usually just like deeper on things you were already thinking about?
Usually it's actually unexpected. I mean, I try to go in with some guiding questions, like things that I've wondered about or some great question that I saw someone ask somewhere that'll kind of be like an overarching way for me to think about the day. Yeah. So recently there's this question, where am I hunting field mice instead of antelope? It's like the idea that you're doing things small, like you're hunting field mice versus the antelope, which is the big thing that really matters, the thing that'll drive things forward. And it's an interesting mental model to think about across all of the areas of your life. It's great professionally to figure out like, okay, where am I thinking small, where I could be thinking bigger? Where's the higher leverage thing? It's also great personally to think about like, what are the stupid little things that I'm spending time on personally when I could be doing the big picture thing, like really being present every single night with my family. We conflate time and energy a lot in general. And you think like, okay, well, I'm spending an hour with my wife tonight. But if you're on your phone and you're doing email or you're watching TV that whole time, it wasn't really worth much. And you'd be better off spending 15 minutes where your phone's in another room, there's no TV on, and you're super present with the person. So I thought that question was interesting. Like, where am I hunting field mice instead of antelope?
I love it. All right, we're back to the story. Wife gives you the thumbs up, the encouragement. Hey, why don't you go do this thing?
Yeah.
So now you're not going to take the Wall Street job. You said
I didn't have the Wall Street job anyway. There was nothing to take, fortunately.
Fair enough. Yeah. But you finally said, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Now what's happening?
So we moved back to the East Coast, and I all of a sudden had all this time to actually focus on this thing that I was doing. Basically, what I crafted in my mind at the moment was my vision for a future ecosystem, which was I want to create this platform and this brand. It's growing. At the time, my newsletter was just getting started.
Is the brand the Sahil Bloom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was Twitter at the time was it. Actually, It was, by May 2021, it was probably like 125, 150,000 followers.
Cool.
No newsletter yet. And I said, okay, I'm going to go create this thing, this creator ecosystem, a platform and a brand around myself. I'm going to continue to build on that. I've been doing it on the weekends. If I can go whole hog into this thing and continue to expand it, there's a playbook for that. Like I knew there were creators that had done it, these different areas. Here's how I'm going to approach it. Could sketch out a plan around that. And then I'm going to build this business ecosystem in the background. And the agency, that thing that I had created, was sort of the initial engine around that. It was like, okay, there's this business that I'm basically driving leads to silently via my platform. I'm not selling it. I have never once tweeted saying like, hey, I offer these services. Like, and people are like, oh, do you have a marketing sheet or a landing page? I'm like, nope, there's literally nothing. It's just me if you want to send me a message. But somehow I was driving business to it via just being present and being on the platform and doing these things. And so what I thought about was there are going to be other ways that surface like that I'm going to be able to build businesses around that are going to be silent, that I'm not going to have to sell people a whole bunch of stuff. Because what I figured in the early days was the way that creators typically make money is by selling things to their audience or by selling ad slots. So basically it was like, if you're going to go be a creator, big YouTuber or whatever on any of these platforms, it's like you have sponsors that pay for stuff and then you go sell products. And so you're a big creator and now you have t-shirts and hats and courses and all these other ways. But you're selling. You're like, hey, you like me. Here's this thing that I offer and you can sell a bunch of things to people. My bet was it's very hard to do that for the next 30 years of your life. Yeah. And very few people have ever done that. In a normal career path, you have longevity built into it. Like at a W-2 career path, at a big corporation or at a private equity fund, you show up every day, you do like reasonably good work, work hard, you get promoted every year, you get your 2 to 5% pay raise and you're happy. And you just you can do that for 30 years. They give you your gold watch and you retire. That's life. In the creator career path, there is none of that. There's no longevity built into any of this. Plenty of creators come for 6 months. They have their massive growth hack period and then they fizzle out and aren't there. And so if you're building your life around this, you could take care of your kids off of it. I just figured man, that would scare the shit out of me if it was all based on having to sell courses to people. Yeah. And I don't know what the course would be. I don't know what I'm qualified to talk about to sell a course or sell t-shirts or whatever. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to build my platform and brand and do the creative work and dislocate that from how I was actually making money on a daily basis and have that be based on businesses generally around things that I thought were similar in profile to what I had done with this little mini agency, which was higher ticket services, lower touch, a good client base that doesn't churn a lot, that you're really driving value for. And so I just opened my mind and became observant to what am I spending money on or seeing other people spend money on that I am actually qualified to do. And that was the kind of mental model or framework that I started applying to all of the different areas of what became, a holding company now that has 10 plus businesses in it. So when we were texting, you said you employed the Amazon model, which is basically what you just said. Yeah, that makes me sound I'm not saying that in a grandiose context I think I'm that impressive. But what I did was, so Amazon, the example I'm kind of relating it to is with AWS. They were spending all this money on servers and they took what was a cost center of spending tons of money on servers and turned it to a profit center with Amazon Web Services. They actually owned all of that. So now every startup in the world was having to pay them in order to do it. So something that they were spending a lot of money on turned into something they were making a lot of money on. I wanted to employ that exact same model. And, this is fast forwarding a bit, but like video is a perfect example of this. I was spending $5,000 to $10,000 a month on video services for the editing of all of my stuff. Like when we go on this, we do this recording. This then gets turned into a whole bunch of clips that go out on all of my channels that drive this flywheel and growth engine for my platform. That's not free. I can't, edit videos. I'm completely inept. Maybe if I learned how to, I could do it, but it'd be a bad use of my time because there's someone much better than that. So I was spending a bunch of money on that every month, and I was sending, little referrals to maybe someone, and I was making a couple $100 or something to do it. And what I realized is like, that's a perfect example of a business that I should just own. Yeah. I should own a business that does that, because then everyone that asks me, hey, who is doing your videos, can go straight into the engine of that business. And that's silent. I'm not having to sell all the time saying, hey, I own this business. 99% of people, to the point of the commenters on your Twitter, have no idea how I make money on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, because that's by design. It's silent. Like it's, I'm not selling things to my audience, but if people want to come buy from me and they come in through the DMs or through wherever it is, email, I have something that can help them with whatever their need is.
Well, and the other part, and this was my experience, it made me want to know more about the business. When I think I was texting Nick or something, and he's like, oh, he has an agency. I was like, first went to Google. It's like, can't find anything. I was like, couldn't find anything anywhere. I was like, this is a secret business.
It's the black card. That's by accident.
Seriously. I think.
Yeah. And I mean, today that's like, look, there's that like personal brand business. There's now another one that's sort of a more formal business that I co-founded with a handful of people that does more like premium ghostwriting service at scale, which we're technically still in stealth. We'll announce it officially probably within the next month. But that business is already at 100K plus MRR, already a scale business without having announced it, just from like people that are silently coming through again. And that'll be a big business. But, there's that. There's like newsletter growth one that we just announced that's already, with one announcement, we brought in, 4 million of ARR interest or something in a single tweet, in a single announcement. We've got video businesses, animation businesses, web design stuff, like general kind of like design services, graphics, things like that. There's like businesses built around all this. All of them are now generating over 1 million of ARR. Like, I mean, they're real scale businesses that are at, because they're high ticket services and they're not massively labor intensive, they're all 50+% net margin businesses that I can co-found, never have to actually operate, and, own anywhere from 20 to 100% of them.
Okay, that's the next question. So how do these businesses spin up? Let's just take the video thing. I'm spending $5,000 to $10,000 a month on video. I should probably be making money off this. What do? You go find an operator, find somebody.
I'm very fortunate that I have, and this is, I guess, as yet unannounced as well formally, but I have a close friend who I've known for many years who's a really seasoned agency operator and who's built and scaled multiple 8-figure agencies, sold them, and was looking for his next thing. And so we had been talking for a while about stuff I was working on, and we sort of identified this big idea. And he's the perfect operator to go and do these kind of things, because he's able to actually build and scale multiple agencies with a kind of co-leveraged backend, which is the real secret sauce of it. If you can use the same people across multiple storefronts and multiple geographies, may have different people promoting it, you can really create a powerful business that has a ton of leverage at scale, because you have, a shared backend of the same video editors or the same people that are kind of doing the shared services. So that's really the key, is like the amazing operator whose skill set is just around operation partnered with the person whose skill set is around distribution. And that's mine. I can do distribution really well. Like if we need to announce anything, if we need to amplify things, if we need to drive new leads, like, hey, we have 5 slots more open. Like I know how to fill those 5 slots yesterday. Like I can go do that. I have no idea how to operate this business, how to like manage the hundreds of contractors or employees, do payroll. I have no competency around that. But if someone else is great at that and I can be great at the distribution side, that's a really good marriage of skill sets.
Okay, we'll talk about distribution in a second. You mentioned flywheel. How would you describe your flywheel?
So I basically have sitting at the top of it what drives the entire thing, my platform and brand. And today, that's scaled meaningfully from what we talked about when I first started going all in
where
on
are we
it.
at today?
In May 2021, when I went all in on it, it was 125,000 ish on Twitter and nothing else. Today, Twitter's at about 1 million. Instagram in 9 months has grown to close to 400,000. LinkedIn's probably close to 300,000. My newsletter is close to 500,000, which is probably the most valuable piece of all of it because it's, an owned audience. You're not renting it from a platform. And I think that basically covers it across all of it. So it's, 2.5 million people or so across all of it, or, just north of 2 million across all of it, and growing at, a really nice compounding clip to the point where the path to 10 million is not crazy to me to envision and see. I think it has to run through video because Twitter, you're not really going to get much bigger than 1 million on Twitter. It's just like that's 1% of the daily active users. It's already quite a bit of penetration. So it has to come through video, and like YouTube will be kind of the next thing and the next area.
For you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I have one of the businesses I own is a YouTube production business, so that'll do all of it. And again, it's nice for me because I get free services through all these businesses. So now my cost centers turned into profit centers, and I don't spend money on them. It saves me a ton of money every month too. I was like, probably saves me 50 grand a month or something that I don't have to pay through the businesses.
You
to
literally
run
have
all
no
this
overhead.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I have a chief of staff that is kind of my main employee that allows me to sort of sit in the clouds and do creative work. He manages, all of the people, all of the relationships, all of the different stuff on sort of the ops and the back end of the content stuff. And then all I have to do is the creative work of writing, video, spending time with people, sort of floating in the clouds. It's great.
And the content you write, basically maybe a variation from it, write it once, but it fits in all the different.
Yeah. I mean, that speaks to the flywheel. So the platform that sits at the top, I think of what are the ways where I can create once and have it sold, I'm not really selling anything, but sold 100 times. And that's hyperbole. It's not 100 times, but it can be close. Like if I write an idea, it always starts with writing for me because that's how I think. It's what I enjoy most. So I'll write. And if something clicks, like if I can see on Twitter that it has resonance, then there'll be a newsletter piece that gets connected to it usually. And then I'll think about what are the ways that this will play out best across video. And, that might be in talking head type podcast related clips. It might be in animations where the kind of motion graphics animations really bring it to life. But that one idea now plays out across 5 different formats and reaches people in different places. So the Twitter content reaches an audience that is probably 85% male, I think the platform. My Instagram content is 50-50 male, female, and it skews older. So it's an entirely different audience that is then getting brought from that higher top of funnel discovery platform into my newsletter. Because that's the whole game for me is how can I drive people down the funnel to the thing that I own, which is the newsletter.
Okay, so that is the thing.
Yeah, the newsletter is really the one big thing because driving people to something that they're opening in their inbox that you own, that it's, if Twitter decides to shut me down or if someone decides to shut me down, they can't shut down my newsletter is really, really important and valuable. And then for the last piece of this content, it's the book deal, which the newsletter drives the book sales, especially in the early weeks. That's the entire game around it. And so driving that newsletter list to 1 million plus subscribers by the time the book comes out is hugely impactful for the success of the actual book launch.
Okay, so generate a bunch of content, distribute it out through all the channels, collect more users that go into newsletter, and then newsletter point it basically in any direction you want to point.
Yeah.
Like you're shooting with a rifle once they're in a newsletter.
Yeah, exactly. And for now, that's book. And I think it'll continue to be around creative work in the future because I love writing and that's just what I enjoy most. But you can point and shoot that at anything. A lot of people point and shoot their newsletter at a course or at a product that they're selling. I'm never going to sell anything like that. I guess people always say never, but I really have no desire to sell people anything. The book is going to be the first thing that I ask people to buy.
Yeah.
And to me, that's powerful. I want to just give all this stuff away for free. Honestly, Alex Hormozy is a friend of mine. I think he's done a great job with exactly this of like the content he gives out is all free and he makes all his money on this acquisition.com thing that he's building and the platform there. And it's like the PE fund effectively that he has.
Yep.
And I think that's a really powerful model because then you can continue to push out content. Your content gets subsidized by all the cash flow that you're generating at the companies. Like in this instance, I'm getting free services, but also they're making money that within my overall ecosystem, I can reinvest pre-tax into growing my content ecosystem. So I can go and acquire subscribers for my newsletter. I can go get better, design services done. I can expand how I reach people in, greater ways. I can reach more people on YouTube, whatever it is. I can continue to reinvest things as much as I want. And that drives the overall flywheel.
The book. So did you want to write a book? Did somebody approach you? Like when you think about the book in the ecosystem, how does that fit into the whole thing?
I always thought about how can you deepen your connection to a topic. So Twitter is like the most surface level version of any content just because of the nature of a tweet. Newsletter was slightly deeper version of that where you can go a little bit deeper on an idea. Book in my mind was always like, when I come across the idea that I really want to go deep on, that feels like it could be my life's work, I want to write a book on it. And there was probably about a year where I was getting reached out to constantly by people, but I never had an idea that I was excited to really dive into. With a book, my basic premise was like, if this goes poorly, if it is a total flop, I just spent 2 years working on something that flopped, and I want to have enjoyed writing it.
Yep.
And if it goes well, and it crushes it, I'm going to have to talk about this for the next 10 years of my life. At every single party that I go to, people are going to ask me about it. And so I want it to be something that I care about. And so in either path, it had to be something that really mattered to me and not just some BS topic. And so when I finally came across that, which was like summer 2022, I got really excited about diving into it. And the whole like book sale process in a traditional publishing context, it's pretty hilarious. You like basically go on a road show. It's like your company is your book and you have this proposal and you go out and pitch it and you have meetings with the publishers and then they do an auction process and like one day and they all put in bids for your book and then, you try to jack them up as high as you can. It's really fascinating and it was really fun, especially coming from a PE mindset of like, oh, I'm going to crank them on negotiations and do all these things. It was really, really quite fun.
Okay. So how'd you decide who you're going to pick?
It was, I'm going to say like 80% financial and then 20% fit.
Yeah. Pretty much.
I really wanted a 7-figure book deal. Again, that was stupid. It's always stupid to tie your definition of success to extrinsic things that you can't control. We all know that. It's dumb. I write about that all the time.
And we all do it.
It's dangerous to tie your definition of success to something that you can't really control. I couldn't control whether the market was good, whether they saw the vision of how big this could be, whether they appreciated my platform, all these things. But in my mind, I was like, I want to get a 7-figure book deal. And being able to go tell my mom, like, I got a 7-figure book deal, Penguin Random House, whatever, like that's going to be successful. The day of the auction, as it was happening, like the first round of bids came in and they were in the I'll just share numbers. I don't care. The bids were like in the mid 6 figures, basically in the first round of the auction. And I was like, damn, this is going to be a stretch to get anything to the 7-figure range that's going to make this feel like a success. And one of them was like the high bidder and it was like at 700 or something like that. It wasn't there. And then basically the way the auction works was like, we were going to do a second round that's like best and final. You have to give your best and final. And so what I figured was like, well, people are going to go, they all know it's an open auction. So they know what everyone else bid. And so then they get to see, and they have to do game theory in their mind of like, well, I don't want to get, beat by like 10 grand or something. So they have to kind of push. And the second round, I was like, man, I'd kind of resigned myself to the fact that it wasn't going to happen. And before the numbers came in, and I was bummed. I was like walking with my wife and I was like, I'm trying to stay positive and say that I'm excited about this, but it feels like a failure. Like it feels like I missed. And right as I'm saying that to my wife, I get a call from my agent that the next round of bids came in and someone had like top ticked a bid into the 7-figure range and like meaningfully into the 7-figure, like out of the blue, like doubled their offer or something like that. And I couldn't figure out why. And then someone else came in and beat that by like another considerable margin, like completely astronomical, way out of the range of what I had expected. And I went from being like really bummed to like the highest high of like, this is the best feeling in the world. This is amazing. and then a day later, the success of like some cool event wears off and you're like, shit, now I have to write this book and like I need to sit down and make a plan for how to do this. It was a very cool experience, but really, really hilarious to just like see how that type of thing actually plays out.
You've obviously thought about it a lot. How will the book fit into the overall flywheel? So once it's written, a lot of people say like, oh, you don't really make money on a book, but it lets you make money elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean,
Debunk
I obviously
that.
made money on the advance, which is great. And then, that was the US deal. Then I sold it in the UK, which was another big deal. And then international, I don't know, there's probably 20 or so international deals that have been sold. So it all adds up to actually a pretty meaningful sum, at least for me. Not for someone worth $150, $200 million, but for me, it's meaningful, at least today. And, it also gives them an incentive to really focus on your book. So that's the bigger thing for me is like, you're the most important book in their arsenal that comes out during that period of time at that point. So they're not just going to like give up on it or something. They're going to want to put marketing resources behind it. They're going to want to push it with their, channels, etc. And that matters actually with a book. So for me, the way that I see it fitting in is that it is like the keystone piece of content that you put out as a writing focused creator. I'm a writing first creator, at least for now. And so this is like the real credibility enhancing keystone piece of content. And it drives everything else. Like it will drive a whole lot of speaking business for me. I already do some. It'll be a huge driver of speaking business for me because I'll be able to go talk about the content that's around it. That speaking stuff gets fed straight back into the overall engine around clips, around things that are being put out. Speaking business, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we went live here. Like there are people making a lot of money doing speaking gigs only. I mean, I know some like random people that are getting paid 30 to 50 grand per appearance because they're very entertaining and they nail their shtick on stage. And they're going around and doing like 30 to 40 talks a year, like just on the circuit over and over and over again. I don't want to do that, but it's kind of nice to know that you could and that you have the credibility going and do it. And that a lot of that relies on having a book that was a success. Like this one person that I'm talking about is a New York Times bestselling author. And so that's like the calling card that he has, that he can go in and credibly get that speaking rate as he continues to go and do it. I find speaking really fun. I really like being on stage. I like interacting with people, being in front of people. And so I love the idea of getting to do more of that post the book.
Is there anything in the social media world? You said like newsletters, highest value, Twitter's obviously up there. Anything that you don't like or anything coming down the pipe that's interesting that most people aren't using as a channel?
I mean, I think LinkedIn is the most interesting thing in the world right now.
You've become big
content.
on LinkedIn. Okay,
yeah, like
why?
I think LinkedIn is just like an amazing content arbitrage that still exists, that it gives me like the same feeling as Twitter in the early days when I was getting started there, that you can build a big audience there very quickly. It's very positive. You're starting to see some negativity brewing, more like, what Twitter has a lot of, but it's not much because people have their job tied to their face. And so that actually restricts how much people want to talk crap on the platform. But Twitter, or LinkedIn rather, only recently realized that it has this massive potential as a creator platform, and it's starting to invest behind it and put real dollars and resources behind it. And you can really reach a lot of people there, and you can really reach a lot of your, whatever your buying group is that you want to reach. And so I think LinkedIn for most people is probably the easiest, lowest lift for getting started as a creator.
And literally all you're doing is taking the same stuff you would post on Twitter and just posting it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, usually.
Like you're not tweaking it.
No,
really.
I haven't really written much de novo content for LinkedIn. It's just a different audience. There's a good amount of overlap, I'm sure, but no one ever is like reading something on LinkedIn and then responding and saying like, I already read you post this on Twitter. It's just, they're not. I don't, for whatever reason.
Well, when you started, you literally just screenshotted tweets and just posted those in like a slideshow.
Yeah, that was the hack early on, was like you could just do carousel, versions of your tweets. And then I think LinkedIn got savvy to the fact that they didn't want people like only creating content from Twitter and then bringing it over here. And so they, I think, started deprioritizing some of that to just incentivize people to create actual LinkedIn content. So I do a little more that's like actually looks more like de novo content on the platform now, but I think LinkedIn is like still the best content arbitrage opportunity for building like a real following that matters.
All right. So you've built a holdco that's making a lot of cash each month. You've prioritized it to where you're not operating any of these businesses. You get to focus in your genius zone pretty much all day.
Yeah.
What do you do with this cash? Like, how do you think about reinvesting this cash? Is it to acquire more customers, find new platforms, tinker with stuff? Like, how do you think about what to do with this money?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very much in growth mode right now.
Yeah.
Especially before the book launch. Like, I really have a big vision for how I want the book launch to go and the success of that and for the size of my platform as I continue to go. What gives me the most energy is impacting people and reaching people.
Yeah.
I'm actually not particularly money motivated. If I was really money motivated, I would have stayed in private equity.
Yeah.
And people say like, oh yeah, you know, everyone says they're not money motivated, but like seriously, my actions have played that out. I would have stayed in private equity and had a really high degree of certainty of making a whole lot of money on the track I was on. And I didn't. And it's because I have plenty of money. Like, I have a great life. I'm super happy. I actually don't want to screw it up by making too much more money. Like, you know, I have like deep fears of like money changing my relationship, people I love, you know, impacting how my son is raised. Like, all of these things actually worry me. And so I think much more about how can I impact and reach more people with the ideas that I'm putting out. Because I genuinely believe that things I'm sharing are valuable to people, and I can see the impact they have. Like, when I tell the story of, you know, moving back to be closer to my family, I had someone reach out a few weeks ago saying that they read that, did the same, and then 6 months after, their parent was diagnosed with cancer and died. And the fact that they had moved back gave them 6 months of when they were healthy, that they were all together, that they'll cherish for the rest of their life. And that was like this holy shit moment to me of things that I'm writing from my desk sitting here in New York are impacting people around the world in some actually meaningful way. And if one person goes and makes that change in their life, that's influence to me. Like, people talk about influencers. I've never wanted to be an influencer, but that's very real. And that's positive influence that you can create in someone's life. And so if I can continue to reinvest cash from businesses in order to do more of that and reach more people with what I think is a positive message, that's what I want to do. There's a whole lot of negativity out there. In general, on social media, what does best is negativity, because it draws people that agree with it and it draws people that disagree with it. And we've seen people do really well with this as a content strategy. Nick, who's a friend of both of ours, like, this is his content strategy. He puts out like, you know, a tweet about HOAs or whatever that like drives tons of business to his different things in his ecosystem. Yeah, the little deck or the like Pappy with a Diet Coke next to it or whatever. Like, he's the best at that. I don't want to do that personally. It's just not what I want to do. And more power to him for wanting to do that and being, you know, and not letting it bother him when people get angry. For me, I'm like, if I can reach people with a positive message and just stay in that, maybe it means I have to grow a little slower or that I won't reach the size that I otherwise could if I was controversial. But I'm okay with that trade-off.
Yeah.
I kind of just want to play my own game. That's like the broader, as I say all this stuff to you and I'm thinking about like, what's the common thread here? I don't really care about being like the richest person in the world. I don't really care about being the like largest content creator in the world. I don't think I'm going to do any of those things, actually. There's like, the concept is there's a price for anything you want to achieve in life. All you do is you know what that price is and you know what you want to achieve, and you have to decide if you're willing to pay that price for the thing you want to achieve.
Yep.
There is a steep price for reaching the 0.001% of any given field. Content creating, business, whatever it is. I'm probably not willing to pay that price, because I think the price means I'm not going to get as much time with my son. I'm not going to get as much time with my wife. My relationship might suffer. There is a price. And I'm very eyes wide open and clear-eyed about what the price is and what the thing I want is all along the way. And so sometimes that means, you know, like pulling back your expectations of actually what you're going to go and do because of what the price you're actually willing to pay for the thing is.
I talked to, I don't know if you know David Sinra that runs Founders, but he reads all these books and biographies on these world changers.
Perfect example.
But they all have the same in common. I mean, a lot of them build huge businesses, neglect everything else. They never really look at the price because, again, their kind of God is the business, is the money.
And that's fine, by the way. Like, the world needs people like that.
But to have the self-awareness that like what you said, making too much money could impact how I raise my son. Like, thinking that at your age and where you're obviously headed is something that I would say 0.001% of people ever really think about. And to your point, the fact you're sharing that and maybe now 2% of people are going to think about it.
Yeah.
I meet a lot of people that make a lot of money and have really tough personal situations.
Yeah.
Usually driven by money, but also you have every opportunity in the world to grow a big ego if you want. I mean, like the world loves you. They're pumping you up. That's typically what happens. And I just think it's huge that you're even thinking about it.
Yeah. I just really want to know, with all of these people, there's like, we read these biographies, we get all in awe of like John Rockefeller. And I've read all these biographies and I love these guys. I think, and girls, like, I think it's amazing. There's incredible stories. I can learn a lot from them, but I don't want what they did. I actually have zero desire to, be the like world changing CEO or the like, I used to want to be president. Like I have zero desire to want to be president. It sounds terrible to me. I think I can impact way more people not being president than being president. And so I just think that like more people do need to think about that. What is the price of the thing that I'm trying to achieve?
Yeah.
And just be aware of like, is that a price I'm willing to pay? And if not, what's the price of the like slightly lower thing that I maybe, that I maybe want to achieve? And that might be a price you're actually really willing to pay.
Yeah. All right. We got about 10 minutes left. Let's just maybe talk about what's going forward. So you've built a holding company. You have businesses that are tangential to what you're already doing. You have a book coming out that will be a new funnel for, one, making money off the book, but two, probably a wider audience. You've kind of mentioned a few things that you haven't announced. Are you going to get into are you going to do any co-founding of businesses that maybe have nothing to do with you? But, well, maybe I wouldn't say nothing, but we were talking about the cold plunge earlier, where maybe you're like, hey, I'll partner with a cold plunge company, or I'll partner with this company. Or is that something you stay away from and you stick to more of the hidden businesses that nobody knows about?
Yeah. I've thought about it for sure. I mean, I think to the question earlier on like hunting antelope versus field mice, the really big brain version of all of this is you create a personal private equity fund. I am probably one of like, I don't know if there's any other creators in the world who have the background in private equity that I have and that deal making experience that I have. That would tell you that what I should actually do if I wanted to go make $1 billion, if I wanted to go make $100 million on something, is that I should raise some money at like a holdco level or something and go use it to go buy a substantive business that I can really impact with my platform. Maybe not today, but once I'm at 10 million or so, kind of subscribers, followers across the ecosystem, you can meaningfully impact the trajectory of a business. I think that like what Kim Kardashian is doing with this private equity fund is one of the most genius things I could possibly see for making a ton of money. People hated on it, but she has enormous influence with a consumer business to drive business to it. Private equity funds have been telling their LPs they were going to create value at the companies they buy for the last, 50 years that the industry has existed. Usually it's BS. She can actually go and create real value day one by just posting about whatever the company is that they go and acquire. And that, I can't think of a better business model for making a lot of money than raising a bunch of money from other people that you get upside on.
Yep.
And so if there was the big brain version of this, would be doing that. I don't, to the point of me, like, do I want the price and the game that I want to play? I don't know that I want to do that, but that's the big brain version of it. I think there's a like slightly smaller brain version of that where you do what you said, which is like things that you really have, connection and resonance with. And there's really like product audience fit to be a collaborator or co-founder around it. Cold plunges, saunas. I don't know if it's ever going to be any one of those things, but I share a lot about health and, the general things that I'm doing and routines around my life. So could I envision a world where that could happen? Yeah, probably. I mean, I've sold a lot of cold plunges for those guys. I've sold a lot of saunas, and I actually don't make money on any of that. I've sold a lot of athletic greens along the way. Like all of this stuff, it's things that are a part of your life that you clearly have connection with your audience around that I think can be impactful. I'm just not, I'm trying to take a page out of the essentialism playbook and like focus on less but better as a mantra around my overall life. I have a tendency to get shiny object syndrome and jump from thing to thing very, very easily. And it's so detrimental to my overall life when I do that, because it ends up just taking time away from the things that I really care about, which is time with my son, time with my wife right now. There's this question I often ask myself of, what am I saying no to by saying yes to this? And I think it's an important question that we all need to ask ourselves more. What, by saying yes to this new opportunity, this exciting thing, this shiny object, what are the things that I'm saying no to? And that's like, again, back to that analogy. That's the price that I'm going to pay for saying yes to this thing. And if the price I'm going to pay for some new opportunity. Like if someone says, hey, we'll pay you, $100 million to come work 80 hours a week for us for the next 5 years, I'm saying no, like faster than you can do anything. I mean, it's the easiest choice in the world to me because I don't care. Like it doesn't matter to me. And I'm not going to come work 80 hours a week. Like it's just, I don't want to do that anymore. I did that for many years.
Yep.
And there was a time in my life where I don't want to do it anymore. And I don't need $100 million. So that is the thing that I'm really thinking about more and more now is like, how can I just continue to do less, but better?
Yep. On that note, and we'll bring it home on this, the less but better, when you think about your business and you think about creating content, and man, I'm just blown away every week. Is like, man, he thought of something else to talk about. Like, at what point do you go, maybe it's not recycling, but is there infinite amount of things to talk about in your brand, or will your just brand evolve as your interests change?
Yeah, that's why my brand, that's why I don't have a lane. Everyone says like you should niche down and like, are you the mental models guy? Or are you the frameworks guy? Or are you the this guy? Or are you the that guy? You're supposed to be like, put in your Twitter bio that you're the X, the X guy, whatever it is. I've never been that. My bio says that I explore my curiosity and share what I learn along the way. And what that means to me is that I'm just sharing things that I come across on my own journey, things that I find interesting or valuable along the way that I'm wrestling with personally, I'm going to talk about. There's a never-ending list of things that I'm engaging with on a daily basis and thinking about. And that's how my newsletter gets written. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to write about next week. I don't know until Monday what I'm going to write about for the Wednesday newsletter that goes out. And for a lot of content creators, they like go nuts when I tell them that. Like, people that are like really regimented, they have their schedule for the next 2 months of exactly what they're going to write about. I can't do that. It would drive me crazy if I tried to pursue it that way. My newsletter that goes out tomorrow morning, we're recording this on a Tuesday, newsletter goes out Wednesday morning. That came together reading an article in the sauna on Sunday night that I thought was really interesting, that I sat there for 20 minutes, like sweating my ass off thinking about, and made some notes while I was sitting there. And then Monday morning when I sat down to do my newsletter writing, that was what I wrote about. It wasn't like some pre-planned thing. It was like, oh, this is an interesting idea. How do I think about this slightly differently? How does the world look in my view with this mindset in mind? And that's how it comes together. And so for me, that's a never-ending, reservoir of ideas and things that are coming out. Do I recycle things? Absolutely. Like when I think there are good ideas that can be said slightly differently, I definitely draw upon that. But the ability to come up with new ideas, it's really just governed by what are you consuming? And then how much are you thinking? How much time are you spending actually wrestling with those ideas and thinking on a daily basis?
The most impressive part of this whole conversation is you've obviously figured out leverage, the simplicity of it. I think a lot of people listening probably think, man, he's got this huge team. He doesn't really even write his own stuff anymore. It's this huge, like you said, 3-month calendar.
Yeah. Team is one.
A team is one.
Yeah. It's me and then my chief of staff, who is amazing and has been an enormous help in my life in just like helping tackle all the ops in the back end, but there's not a team. I've never used AI to like write things for me either. People always ask me this, like, are you using ChatGPT? Half of that is because I'm technologically totally inept and I'm just not good enough to know like the prompts. Like I tried to mess around with it and it was so bad because I didn't do the prompts, and I'm not going to read all the threads about how to do prompts better. And the other half is I just love writing. And so like doing AI for the writing for me would be like me removing the one thing that I actually enjoy working on a daily basis. Yeah. It's not like I'm trying to get rid of the writing from my life. I like doing that. And so, I mean, the team leverage is fantastic, but there's not really a team. The services are outsourced, but they're things I own now.
All right, man. So impressive. I'm really glad to call you a friend. I appreciate you coming today.
Let's go get some steak.
I'm so excited.